Good morning. I'm Michelle Scott-Huffman. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm the chaplain here at First Unitarian Universalist Church of Springfield. I'm excited to be with you all today, and I want to say Happy UU Easter to you all. Whether you have been a part of a Christian church or have just taken part in cultural Easter celebrations featuring hidden eggs, baskets, and big fluffy bunnies in your life, it's likely that you have celebrated Easter in some way at some point. For many of us, our lifetime of Easter celebrations have been some strange combination of religious and cultural myth and ritual, including important sweet traditions like Cadbury eggs and marshmallow peeps, and perhaps a theological lesson through maybe something like baking biscuits or cookies known as resurrection or empty tomb cookies, in which there is a marshmallow hidden inside, and the marshmallow melts in the baking, and an awestruck child will open it up to discover the prize of emptiness. Of course, it fails sometimes, which is a story I heard from one young family this week who was going to try the biscuit ritual again, hoping for a better outcome than the last time, in which the marshmallow did not melt away, and the awestruck child opened it up and proclaimed that Jesus had turned into a big, sticky clump. This proclamation itself may be fodder for much conversation about the ways that some parts of the church have misused the Jesus stories in ways that have had what I would argue is the exact opposite of their intended effect, which is guilt-producing, exclusionary, and in some cases, abusive practices. But that's another conversation for another day. Today I'd actually like to share another resurrection story, one that was in circulation long before Jesus came onto the scene, perhaps the oldest resurrection story in the ancient world. The resurrection of the Greek god Osiris appears to have had its earliest recorded mentions in the pyramid texts, the first Egyptian funerary texts during the 24th century BCE. The following is an adaptation of the short version of the story written by Mike Streak and found at shorthistory.com. Osiris may have been an early Egyptian king whose triumphs inspired myth and legends that eventually portrayed him as a god who defied death and represented eternal life. For the ancient Egyptians, the story of Osiris is one of tragedy and hope. It's nothing less than the promise of everlasting life. Osiris has been referred to as the perfect or complete being. According to Plutarch, writing around AD 120, Osiris will eventually rise again to govern Egypt. Osiris was credited with introducing early Egyptians to the cultivation of grain, wheat, and barley, and ending the practice of cannibalism. Osiris was the lawgiver and taught Egyptians how to worship the gods. He also introduced the growing of vines, resulting in wine production. So 3 cheers for Osiris. Within religious texts and myths about the ancient Egyptian gods, Osiris was the son of the god Geb and the goddess Nut, born with 4 other siblings, Horus, Set, Nephthys, and Isis, the latter also becoming his wife. Osiris was hated by his brother Set, who contrived to murder him upon his return to Egypt after teaching the Egyptians. Osiris traveled to Western Asia, teaching other cultures. Along with 72 other conspirators, Set invited Osiris to a party, during which he tricked his brother into climbing into a specially made coffin. Once inside, the lid was flung over the coffin and it was sealed, suffocating Osiris. The coffin was then floated down the Nile. Leaving her son, Horus the Younger, under the protection of the cobra goddess, Isis searched for her husband's body, finding it in Byblos, where the coffin had become a part of an immense tree that had been cut down and used to build the palace of the king. Securing the coffin, Isis returned to Egypt. While Isis retrieved her son, Set found the coffin and tore the body of Osiris to pieces. Isis again traveled the land of Egypt, collecting the body parts, yet burying copies of each part in different cities to confuse her enemies. Through her magical abilities and the help of Thoth, Isis revived Osiris, but as king of the underworld, where he ruled and judged the dead in the Hall of Two Truths. By the First Intermediate period, all Egyptians followed the funerary practices of the story, to make them Osiris, identifying with the god. According to social anthropologist Sir James Frazer, in the resurrection of Osiris, the Egyptians saw the pledge of a life everlasting for themselves beyond the grave. Perhaps some of that story sounds strangely familiar to the Christian story of Jesus' resurrection and his subsequent position as a sort of judge in God's court and promise of everlasting life. That is indeed what is commemorated in the Christian church on Easter Sunday after the pomp and pageantry of the emotional and liturgical roller coaster that is Holy Week. When I think about what a UU Easter would look like, I suspect it would have a healthy dose of skepticism, and that words like resurrection and everlasting would be pulled out from the text and inspected like a traveler at the airport getting the special treatment of a random full search by the friendly TSA agent. And I think that's fair. So as we imagine resurrection as a myth or metaphor that may speak life in hard times, let's use a dictionary.com definition of resurrection. Apart from religious usage, it's simply defined as the revitalization of something, coming from the Latin word resurgere, meaning to rise again. We might even take a deep dive into the word everlasting, also translated as eternal, which has unfortunately been interpreted to mean a never-ending afterlife in some imagined heaven or hell, with no regard for the here and now, and for actually living out the teachings of Jesus. Many scholars have written about the difficulty of modern Western understanding in trying to translate the word that in its original Greek context likely meant something more like outside of time or unaffected by time. In essence, then, eternal or everlasting life could be characterized as a new age. Dr. Orville Jenkins notes that the focus is on a new orientation to life, a time of justice and peace, with a concern for the level, quality, and moral character of life. So, what if maybe just for today, on this UU Easter, we sat with the myth for a while? What if we allowed ourselves to imagine that out of the most difficult circumstances in our lives, there might be a revitalization of something, that we might rise again into something new, something timeless, something that takes what we've learned in this time and makes us better, more deeply connected, more peaceful, just, and loving as a human family? Can you imagine that today? We are surrounded right now, quite literally, with disease, destruction, and even some death. But the testimony of the plant world and the animal world and even the earth herself is that out of death comes new life. We are experiencing a crisis in our society that is shining a light on unsustainable systems. And the reality is that some of them just need to die and be buried. And out of the death of systems of inequality and injustice, may there be a revitalization of something, of new ways of being community together that uphold our first two principles, the inherent worth and dignity of every person, and justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. That indeed would be a resurrection and an entry into a new age in our society. I think one of the things that has made us who we are is that we have refused to give up and give in. But we hold on to the hope that the world can be better, and we can help make it so. Out of these ashes, we can rise. We began with the Greek god Osiris, and will close with an American goddess, Maya Angelou, who wrote, "Out of the huts of history's shame, I rise. Up from a past that's rooted in pain, I rise. I'm a black ocean, leaping and wide, welling and swelling, I bear in the tide, leaving behind nights of terror and fear, I rise. Into a daybreak that's wondrously clear, I rise. Bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave, I am the dream and the hope of the slave. I rise, I rise, I rise." in the hope of Maya Angelou and hosts of prophets before her, way back to the prophet Jesus, and even hosts of prophets before him. The hope is that out of death we rise again to new life, not in a literal sense, but in the sense that we become new communities of people for whom love and justice and mercy are the reality instead of a dream. Even today, let's rise together. Blessed be, and amen.